you're looking at a text message that's been sitting in your notifications for 3 days. It's from a friend you actually like, asking if you want to grab coffee or just hang out. You feel this immediate, sharp pang of guilt, followed by a wave of profound exhaustion. You start mentally scrolling through your calendar, but it's not just the meetings or the gym or the laundry that's the problem. It's the sheer weight of the effort required to be on. You type out the words, "I'm so sorry, I've just been so busy lately," and you hit send. Then, you spend the next hour scrolling through a feed of strangers, paralyzed by a strange paradox. You are lonely, but the thought of seeing another human being feels like a second job. We are living in the age of the busy trap. We've been told that our lack of social connection is a personal time management issue, that if we just used better apps or woke up earlier, we'd have time for our friends. But the truth is much colder. We aren't actually too busy in terms of hours. We are too depleted in terms of spirit. We've built a world that harvests our energy so efficiently for profit that there's nothing left over for the people we love. We are experiencing a systemic social bankruptcy, and we're trying to pay the debt with apologies. If you're tired of being the friend who always cancels, or if you're tired of being the one who gets canceled on, I need you to know that this isn't a lack of loyalty. It's a biological response to a landscape that is optimized for transaction over connection. We are the first generation to treat our leisure time as a resource to be spent wisely, rather than a space to be inhabited. We aren't failing at friendship. We're just surviving a culture that has turned existence into an endless series of tasks. We've traded the slow life of spontaneous drop ins for the optimized life of scheduled catch ups. But friendship doesn't scale. You can't 1.5 times a conversation. You can't automate intimacy. When every social interaction requires a logistics plan and a mental health check, we naturally retreat into the safety of the screen. We've been evicted from the public square and told to find community in our DMs. But a DM is just a ghost of a person, and ghosts don't make you feel less alone. Let's look at the first layer of this social exhaustion, the professionalization of private life. In 2026, we don't just live, we manage our brands. We've been taught to view our social circles as networks and our time as capital. Because we are always on the clock mentally, we start to apply the logic of the office to our friends. We look for the return on investment for a night out. We ask if it's worth the drive. This is the ultimate form of self-sabotage. Intimacy is, by definition, an inefficient use of time. It requires wasted hours and nothing moments. By trying to make our social lives efficient, we've stripped them of the very spontaneity that makes them restorative. We aren't hanging out anymore. We're just holding meetings with better lighting. The second layer is what I call the overstimulation hangover. We spend all day being perceived by thousands of people online. We navigate the panopticon of the feed, managing our digital footprints and absorbing the outrage of a global news cycle. By the time 6 p.m. rolls around, our social battery hasn't just run out, it's been melted. We have a social deficit because we've spent our energy on people we don't know, and now we have nothing left for the people who actually know us. This is why we choose the scroll over the stroll. The screen asks nothing of us. A friend asks for our presence, our empathy, and our attention. In a state of overstimulation, that request feels like a threat. We aren't busy, we're just protecting the last sliver of ourselves that hasn't been commodified. The third layer is digital hyperreality. We see the best of versions of community on our screens. Groups of friends traveling, laughing, and living in a state of constant aesthetic togetherness. This creates a state of comparative fatigue. Your actual real life social options feel boring compared to the simulation. We've been trained to crave the spectacle of friendship rather than the weight of it. A real hangout involves awkward silences, messy houses, and the risk of not having anything to say. The digital version is always peaking. This makes the real world feel like a chore. We've become observers of a social life we're too exhausted to inhabit. We are starving for closeness, but we're too full of junk connection to actually eat. Meta. Sex 1.5. So, how do we stop the bleeding? How do we find our way back to each other in a world that wants us to stay home and click? The shift has to be from a resource model to a relational model. Sex point 8. A resource model treats time as something you spend. A relational model treats time as something you share. It's a radical act of rebellion to be unproductive with another person. It's choosing to believe that a 3-hour conversation about nothing is more valuable than a perfect morning routine or a clean inbox. We have to reclaim the low stakes hang. This means lowering the bar for what counts as seeing someone. It's inviting a friend to run errands with you. It's sitting in the same room on your laptops in silence. It's the useless minute where you aren't performing or consuming, you're just there. We have to de-optimize our friendships. We have to be willing to be boring together, because boring is where the safety is. Sex 1.5. I'm not saying you should never say no. I'm saying you should ask yourself if you're saying no because you lack time or because you lack the version of yourself you think you need to bring. Sex, you don't need to be on for your real friends. You don't need to have a take or a life update or a polished story. You just need to show up in your unedited footage. Sex 1.5. The busy trap is a lie designed to keep us isolated, because isolated people are easier to sell to. A person with a deep, messy, unoptimized community is much harder to manipulate than a person with 10 million followers and no one to call for a ride to the airport. Sex 1.5. Tonight, before you scroll past that text again, just think about the weight of a real person, the sound of their breathing, the way the air feels in a room when you aren't the only one in it. What would happen if you stopped apologizing for being busy and started admitting you're just lonely? It's the only way to break the spell. See you.